attracted to your mom, to my mom, your wife?
Why, my first attraction to her was when she was in the 8th grade riding that horse on the street here, which was not paved in those days. And I just thought she was a very attractive young woman, too young for me. I was a senior in high school and she was in the 8th grade. I was a year ahead, and well, anyway, that's my first, and she was a good friend of my younger sister, Layla Lee, and I just was aware of her ever since they moved here. I knew who she was not interested in her at all as a girlfriend because she was too young. But while I was gone, she grew up, and she was very smart, and I recognized that very quickly. And she was beautiful, and she had absolute integrity. She cut no corners, obeyed all the rules, was pleasant to be around, and etc. And she captured my attention during those years.
Sorry, I'm buzzing. Hold on. So, why do you think you fell in love?
It just happened. That's what happens between a man and a woman. You start by holding her hand in a dance, and pretty soon you got your arm around her, and then you're sitting in a car together, and you like what you see and what you feel, and etc. And I was captured. There came a point where I knew that she's what I wanted. But I knew she had this boyfriend. She had been very close to this basketball player from Safford High School. He was tall, good-looking, nice young man. And near her same age. I was quite a bit older than her. And so that's when I asked my dad if I had any obligation to not cut into his territory since he wasn't here.
Tell me about your courtship. How did that start? When did you start dating?
Well, we started dating. I think she told you already that we had. She was Speck, this favorite, one of her good friends, Speck Smith. She grew up with him. He just lived right across the street up here. And he and she were going together quite steadily. And this other girl named Mary Alice Ellsworth, who Speck married, at this one Christmas time when I came home from the university, and we'd both been traded in on the other two, and they in just a few months they were married. Anyway, we sort of were suddenly left out in the cold, so to speak, and so we went Christmas caroling together. And I remember one of our favorite carols was a song called Detour. All the bitter things I find, should have read that detour sign, or whatever. And we just had a great time together. And it went from there to being more serious.
Was that here in Thatcher or at U of A?
Well, I was going to school at the U of A, and she was still going to EA here.
Okay.
I can't remember. I think it was still Gila College in those days.
So you were back for Christmas?
Yeah. And that was the beginning of all of it. We just traded partners and went on.
How did that work with you going back to Tucson and her staying here that next semester?
It was terrible. But I came home almost every weekend, it seemed. I had an old Ford, 1937 Ford two-door sedan. And my dad helped me buy it or something. and I
cashed in your war bonds.
and I had been, I had several $1,000s worth of savings bonds, you know, government issue, $1,000 a piece, and my dad was ready to buy a new car, and he had a Plymouth coupe that didn't have a heater in it. That he had bought right after the war, and he was ready to buy a new car, a bigger one. And so I cashed in my war bonds and bought that car from him, and she and I used that for a long time. After we were married, we still had that car. And it was just, we had so much fun we couldn't imagine. And we had a lot of friends here, Lee Allen and Bruce Curtis, and I don't remember who all. And anyway, when she and I got married, I got to tell you this story. They built a cradle-looking thing, and it had a hole in the bottom if the baby wet, and it was not. You'd pull that hole out, and it would drain the water out. And it had a hammer on the top. If the baby wouldn't go to sleep, you pull a string and that hammer would hit the baby. What else was in that thing, Mom?
I don't know about it.
Oh yeah, it would. You could step on this and it would rock back and forth.
So you came back every weekend pretty much during that spring semester, and then what happened?
When did you go to Mesa to live with your grandparents, Mom?
Well, that was the next year. That summer, when you went to Pendleton, I went to Salt Lake.
So that summer you went to Pendleton to work.
That summer, yeah, and she stayed in Salt Lake and worked. And then Aunt Thelma and Vanda rode back with us in our, I think we were in that Plymouth, weren't we, Mom? Anyway. And then she was down to Mesa for, I think, one semester. And then the second semester, she came to Tucson and was an art student. Sort of like that.
I went to university in the fall. Stayed home in the spring after we got engaged.
I have to say that again in case they didn't pick up on the audio.
Well, she remembers that when we came back, then she stayed here in the fall.
No, went to university.
Went to the university in the fall, and then we became engaged, and she came back.
Stayed home.
Then she stayed here to get ready for whatever we needed to do to be married. And
For that second semester she stayed here.
yeah.
So tell me about when you proposed to her.
I don't remember if there was a specific time. I think we just talked about getting married and gradually talked more and more, and pretty soon we were engaged. Did I ever propose to you, Mom?
I don't remember that.
I don't remember it either. All I knew is that's what I wanted to do.
I remember you said earlier that there was a time when you just knew that this was the one for you.
Well, that was when...
Do you remember the time frame?
Yeah, that was that fall when she went to school to university. And she took the class in life drawing. And they had two models that would come in and take their clothes off, and the instructor would tell them, okay, now I've got the boy with his arm up like this. You capture those muscles, the arm and etc. And one day, we were married by then, weren't we, Mom?
I think so.
Anyway, this boy was on the gymnastics team, the one who was the model. And he would just have an athletic supporter on. The woman would be completely naked. She was a little older woman. And Leona said that when the first day they did that, it was a little bit unnerving. Everybody's a little bit shocked. But from that point on, there was nothing sensual or naked about it. It was like painting a flower pot or a fence, or here's the human arm or whatever. And anyway, one day she and I were walking somewhere. We were married, of course. And here was this boy going the other direction, and she was embarrassed because he had his clothes on. She looked the other way and said, "Oh, good heavens, this is that that boy."
What do you remember about the preparations for the wedding?
Nothing. All I could think of is she and I were going to go to the temple and be married, and that was a great thing.
Tell me about your wedding day.
Of course, she went down with her parents, and I went down with my parents. And
We went down together.
what?
We went down together.
You and I?
Yeah.
Her memory's better than mine. Anyway, we had to be at the temple early because in those days you did everything. You did the initiatory work and the endowment, and then the sealing ceremony, and etc. We were there nearly all day, and anyway, there was a couple who were married in the same ceremony. The stake president knew them, so he just brought them and their families in, and us and our families. We were all in the same sealing room at the same time. And he married one of us, and then he married the other one. Anyway, this other couple was from Pima. His name was Jay Carter, and I can't remember her married or single name. Anyway, here were these two people that were same size, much shorter than us, and both of them a little bit rounder than we were. And here were us two tall, skinny kids. And you pick out what you fit together what you. Anyway, we thought it was interesting that he did both families at the same time, but it didn't bother us. We just thought it was interesting. What have I got?
Have another Kleenex. What do you remember feeling during the ceremony?
I remember thinking to myself, how am I ever going to be able to remember all of this? Somebody's going to have to help me remember all these things they've told us. And and we went to something at the temple once while I was a high councilman or whatever, and President McKay was down. It was a dedication ceremony. They had built a whole bunch of new dressing rooms on the south end of the temple. And the temple had been closed, and they had a rededication ceremony. And I remember him saying in the opening part of that when he first went to the temple, he was so overwhelmed with everything he had been asked to remember that he was afraid to go back. And some of his friends talked to him and finally got him to go back. And he said, I realized when I went back what I was doing was paying so much attention to the physical things that I was asked to remember that I was completely overlooking the great spiritual truths that are taught there. That was very helpful to me. And we've had, your mother and I have had a number of great experiences. We slept through part of that one.
So, as you're getting sealed and you're kneeling across the altar, do you remember what you were thinking or feeling?
I don't. I just knew this was the right thing to do, and that here she was, and that we were doing the right thing. Those other boys could all go to heck. Because she had lots of boyfriends, as she has told you. And she settled on me, and I was delighted with that. Because my view of me, I was still a kind of a smart aleck kid that had some growing up to do.
Tell me about your honeymoon.
We took my mother on the honeymoon with us. And I think we were still using that same Plymouth coupe. And we went to Pendleton almost immediately after our reception, which was on the lawn here where Grandpa and Grandma Carpenter were living at that time. Almost immediately we got in the car with my mother because Mila D had been born up in Pendleton, Oregon, and Jessica needed help. And so we drove up through Nevada and into Oregon. And by then I was much older. I had been the first time we worked there, I'd been what's called a seamer operator. The seamer is the big, heavy machines. The drum was about this big around, and the cans came in through the part of it, and they filled them with peas as they came around, and they were cranking those out about every 3 seconds. Here'd be another can full of peas with its lid. They'd seal it by going around it very fast. I don't remember mechanically how that worked. But by then I was the foreman of the sealing room. That's not a Temple expression, the sealers. Hadn't thought of that till just now. And we rented a little house up there somewhere, stayed there all summer till the peas were all canned, and then we came back home and moved into our house from this. I can't remember the woman's name, but anyway, it was a carriage house from way back in the old days when everybody had a pair of horses and a carriage to get around, before cars, in other words. And so then we came back from that, and we were, frankly, Jordan, we were deliriously happy. We reveled in each other's company, and just life was good. We had enough, but the government, because of the GI Bill, as it was called, the government paid us $125 a month plus all of our tuition costs. In those days, the rent was $25 a month. The rest, the $100 a month, that's plenty of money to get by on in those days. And so I still had 2 years of college left, law school left to do, and away we went. And she was still taking art classes. And I remember whatever the class it was, one of the questions on an exam was, "What does this remind you of?" And I said, and she was telling me about that, and I said, "You can't answer that wrong. Whatever it reminds you of is the correct answer to the question." I don't remember what it was, but I thought that's kind of a dumb way to ask a question. What they should have said is, "What should this remind you of?" And then they could have judged her answer. What else do you want to know? I ramble like crazy, Jordan.
This is good stuff. So you didn't really have after your actual wedding ceremony, you didn't actually have a few days just to yourself? You took off straight away, or?
I don't remember, but the day we were married, we came back here late that afternoon and had made arrangements to rent a cabin up on the mountain. I can't remember whose it was. I know where the cabin is, and it's the next to the last one on this road, wherever. And we stayed there overnight and came back down here the next morning because the we needed to be at this reception, which was that night. And then I think
No, we were there 2 or 3 days.
something
Friday,
like
Saturday, Sunday.
something like that. That's where I first learned she was a good cook. Because there are no cafes up at Turkey Flat. Whose cabin was that, Mom?
Was it Nicholson?
I don't remember.
What did you learn early on that was helpful to your relationship?
With my wife,
Mm-hmm.
to treat her with great respect. Be friendly. Don't hide anything from her. Don't ever say anything insulting or belittling, but treat her with great respect. Whatever else that means.
What were some adjustments that you made early on?
I don't remember any. I don't remember any, frankly. We just fit in very beautifully.
Do you recall some of the best times from early on? Any specific events that stick out?
When we moved to Gilbert to start farming, we traded our Plymouth coupe in on a red Dodge pickup, an old one, and so we loaded all our stuff, whatever we had, in that, and moved to Gilbert. And we had rented a little old house down by the airport. The airport's been gone a long time, and we were farming. I'll very candidly, Jordan, I think if I were doing any of the stuff now that we did then, I wouldn't have the nerve to try it. I would have been realistic and said, there are too many risks here. I don't think I want to try whatever it is I was going to do next. But I was optimistic. I thought, whatever I want to do, I'll make it work somehow. I'll figure out something, and away we'd go. And it was interesting. Only one time did I work for somebody else. That was that first summer while we were still in law school. I worked for John Mickelson. Cly Shumway and I worked for John Mickelson. We would make these. We would set headstones on graves. We had a contract with the city to dig the graves, and we would do that after hours with a pick and shovel. Most of them on the hill out here at Thatcher, and it was tough digging. It would take us about 2 hours. Now they use a backhoe and just go like that 3 or 4 times and the hole's done. And we would set headstones, and we would pour the little cement railings around burial plots, and etc. But other than that, I worked, of course, for my brother-in-law, Milan D. Smith, up at Pendleton. But other than that, I always worked for myself. I didn't think I would ever fail at anything. I was supremely self-confident, and that was not based on anything other than my own ego. If somebody else can do it, I can make that work. To heck with it. I'll full speed ahead.
Yeah.
Something about the torpedoes.
How did you feel about your in-laws?
They were fine. I got along. Your Uncle Gerald was one of the purest men I ever knew, Jordan. While I was the stake president, I went and found him and extended a call to him to serve as a high councilman. And he was petrified. Gerald was timid. And he talked me out of it. he pleaded with me. I can't make a talk. I don't know what to say, and he pleaded so heavily that finally I said to him, well, Gerald, if you feel this strongly about it, I'll honor your request, and we may do it later, but right now we're not going to do this. And he had of all the men I ever knew, he had a pure heart. And he has a nice family. What other in-laws do I have? Oh, I always liked Aunt Janice, and she had 3 different husbands. 2 of them died. No, 1 of them died. Aunt Janice was a very lovely person, and
How about your mother-in-law and father-in-law?
I always had great respect for Jim Carpenter. He was a diligent, hard-working man, and Grandma, she they had a little one-row cotton picker, and they didn't have a pickup. And Jim would pull the cotton trailer over the edge of the field. Cotton trailers weren't very big in those days. And he'd pull it over the edge of the field, and then she'd hook onto it with the car and pull it to the gin. And she was a diligent worker. She worked in the school cafeteria to help me have enough money to pay the bills. But when he made a lot of money when I don't know if you remember, probably you don't because you didn't need to remember, but long staple cotton was much more expensive and was harder to grow. And this is one of the few areas in the country where they could produce it well. And so there was a couple of years where Grandpa made a lot of money here on that long staple cotton.
How did you and Mom handle disagreements when they came up?
I would give in. Now she won't tell you that's how it. No. I don't know if we had very many. We would disagree, but it was never disagreeably. We'd talk it through and reach a conclusion and not worry about it anymore. And my theory was, if it's not important, don't argue about it. If it doesn't matter who's right, just get past it, and still be friends. We didn't have very many disagreements.
How did you divide up the responsibilities between the 2 of you?
She took care of the house and I did everything else. I don't remember if we ever even talked about that. I don't remember. I can't give you a good answer, Jordan.
All right.
I ran the business, she ran the house, and it's kind of that simple. I remember we would have a discussion. She would say, "We need to have a budget." And I would, my position always was, I will borrow only the money I need, and I spend it only on things that have to be spent. And whatever's left is what we've made, but a budget just gets in the way. As long as I'm not going to be stupid about money and be careful, we don't need a budget. It's just, and there's the phone. Are you in there, Mom?
Yeah. Hello, this is your
What were the main struggles or challenges in your marriage?
Hello?
I can't remember. We didn't have very many, if any. I don't have any kind of an answer for that, Jordan.
All right. What do you think were the main forces keeping your marriage together?
The children and the church. And our own basic fundamental commitment that we were going to be decent people and keep the commandments and obey the word of wisdom and love our children. And I remember she and I talked about that that we were going to treat our children with the same respect as we would Sister Kimball, President Kimball's wife. And if she came to visit, we would treat her with great respect. We would do the same with our own children. If we corrected them, we would do it lovingly and kindly, and we followed that. And somehow it made a difference. I can't claim a lot of credit for that, but that's the way we did you children. I don't know what your memories are, but that was kind of, we talked about that quite often.
What stages of your marriage were the happiest?
The full-time mission and the temple, because we had very few responsibilities by then, and could focus on other people that we had responsibility to. I'll tell you a basic thing. There was a one of the ex-temple presidents was serving there in some capacity, and I can't even remember his name, but he was a criticizer, and he disagreed publicly with me 2 or 3 times in an insulting way. And I made up my mind I was not going to let him do that. I was not going to let him create a problem for me. And so I don't even remember what the issue was now, but I finally just said, well, you can think that way if you want to, but we're not going to do that here in this temple. I know. We went right on. He never did like me after that. I don't know if he liked me before, but he was a sour kind of a guy.
When were you the closest, do you think?
Mom and I?
Mm-hmm.
When in the law office here? Well, I shouldn't say that. The temple. We were very, very close in the temple because we had all those people who we worked with, who we served, and they treated us kindly. I think one of the close times is when I passed out in the cafeteria that time. She and I had gone there and bought a little evening meal. I think it was about 4 o'clock or something. Our shift was over, and we went there and bought this meal. And all of a sudden, I could feel myself fainting, and I said to Leona, I said, something's happening. I'm about to lose it or something. And I gradually went down, and she moved the plate, and I was out. I had fainted. And somebody else saw what happened, and 2 or 3 people came immediately and massaged my back and my shoulders and straightened me up, and I came to. And I said, what in the world was that? And they said, none of us know, but we think you ought to go to we ought to call an emergency team. So they called, an ambulance came, and I, against my wishes, I got in it and laid down, and we went to the hospital, and all my children were worried, the children that lived there. Came and were all standing around, and they finally said, well, we can't find anything wrong. we think you just well go home. And as I sat up in bed, I was laying down on something. As I sat up to start getting dressed, I said to whoever was there, "It's happening again." They said, "Yeah, we can see it. Your pulse rate's down to about 29. You said you don't. We've already corrected that." They said you don't function at that level. There's not enough blood. And so they laid me back down and said, "You need a pacemaker, and you need it immediately." And so we made arrangements for that, and within 3 or 4 days, I had a pacemaker in place, so I couldn't ever go that low again. But that was I was not frightened. It was just something that happened, you know. And she and I were very close during that. Huh. I'd forgotten about that.
What are her qualities that add to your happiness?
She's very beautiful. She's got a supremely intelligent mind, and she is never any question about her integrity and her purity of spirit. Never, never, ever. She is just actually a good person, Jordan. People like to be around her. She's pleasant and sweet. I've forgotten who I was talking to just recently. Some guy said, "I always enjoy listening to your wife on the phone. She sounds happy and pleasant." I said, "Well, she is." Anyway, that's the answer.
What about your qualities that you think added to the happiness of the marriage?
I think I'm kind of easygoing. I'm not a demanding person. My nature is to help other people feel comfortable about themselves. And I remember once having the responsibility, the total final responsibility of executing among a young man that I had known all of his life. And I didn't want to do that to his family. And I tried to figure some way around that, to be lenient with him or something. And we were at the stake office building, stake center, and as the three of us were trying to decide, my two counselors and I, what to do, I said, "I need to be alone for a few minutes," and so I stepped outside the building and prayed about this, and the idea suddenly came to me, if he's going to get this behind him, he had been involved in some serious moral transgressions with women. I said, there's only one way he's ever going to, this idea came to me. If you really want to help this boy, go ahead and excommunicate him, have him lose everything and feel what that's like, and then he can come back and have his blessings restored and get this over with. Otherwise, he's not going to get over it. It's going to hang on forever. And once I received that feeling, it was easy to, from then on, it was easy to do. I had a bishop come to me one Saturday night about 9 o'clock out to Gilbert there, and he sat down and cried, and he said, "I've been committing adultery with one of my secretaries. It's been going on now for 2 or 3 months, and I can't stand it anymore, and I have to get this off my chest." And of course we excommunicated him immediately, but he has come back. His wife stayed with him. It was very difficult for her, of course, but if I have a whatever you say, a quality, it's that I can be patient when it's important to be patient, but I can be strict when it's important to be strict. And anyway, the bottom line is, your mother is one of the best things that ever happened to me. I shake my head and back and forth and say, why me? She had she had wide choices. She had many boyfriends who would have loved to marry her, and I have to not think about that.
No.
See her going through what she is now, and to have to admit to myself that I'm probably going to lose her before too many more months. But she and I have talked about that. And what is next in the other world is very, very beautiful for us. And this is not a tragedy. It's a difficulty, and it's not easy, but it's she and I will make this work however it comes out. Anyway,
What common interests have you shared?
8 children. and we enjoy being with each one, every one of you, either alone or in a group or whatever. It's very pleasant to us. Our dear Jana, she's been through the mill, and I'll be forever grateful to Dave Lindsay for in effect rescuing her from those 2 other men that she had.
What ways did you find to meet your own individual needs, sort of outside of marriage?
I don't know if I had any outside of marriage.
Okay.
I genuinely don't know if I had any individual needs.
Were there conscious choices that you made to meet the needs of your relationship?
I remember telling the missionaries on a regular basis, especially those who were fairly new, I would tell them, you're now engaged in a new course of study that you've been, because you're not married, you haven't been in it before. But you're now engaged in Marriage 101. And let me tell you what I mean by that. If you're normal at all, there will come times during your married life when there'll be some other woman's path cross yours, and you will think to yourself, now there's a very pretty woman. Her personality fits me. I would like to get better acquainted with her. And I would say to them, don't you dare ever let that go any further than that. When that happens, and it will happen to you, you simply slam that door and slam it hard. That doesn't mean you have to be rude to whoever these other people are, but don't ever let it go beyond that, because it can destroy you. But it happens. It happens because there is the regular interchange between people, and there's a danger in it. And so you're now experiencing that as a missionary. There'll be some young woman your age in one of the wards where you're stationed, and you'll say, geez, it would be nice to get acquainted with her. You can't do that. That's against the rules. It's as if you were married now. So I told them, this is Marriage 101. Get used to it. Don't just, if those thoughts enter your mind, cut them off immediately. Don't let it go any further. You don't need to be rude to somebody, but don't let it go any further. And I never had any problem with that with her. There's been a woman or two that I've looked and said to myself, just what I've been saying to the missionary, that I would like to get acquainted with her. But I realized very quickly, as a practical matter, you can't do that. You can be their friend, but that's all. And I had a very good associate who tried to flirt with your mother, and after we were married. And she told me about it. I said, do I need to worry about it? She said, no, I've seen him do this with other women, and I want no part of it. And she said, I have cut it off. You don't need to worry about me. And I didn't. But he was flirting with her. And he was good at it. And anyway, life is interesting.
Okay. Where did you go for help during the rocky times of your relationship?
I didn't. Unless I went to my knees. We really... Well, let me tell you this one. We had this old boyfriend. She, in effect, she chose between me and this kid from Safford who was younger than me, who was off in the Navy. And I asked her to marry me, and she agreed, and then she said, I need to go tell him what I'm doing. So I went with her, and we went to his house, called him on the phone wherever he was, and with his family listening. Years later, our paths crossed again, and I could tell that he still held some appeal for her, and it scared the heck out of me. I was uneasy. I didn't worry about her being unfaithful to me, but I didn't know how to handle this, and so she and I talked about that. And she explained it to me completely and said, you don't need to worry about that. Said, yeah, I still like him. I would have probably have married him if you hadn't come along. Meaning I was very close to him. And I still feel he's like a good friend and so on. But that's the only problem I've ever had. I still don't like him. I don't like to be around him because he's very, very friendly with her and pats her on the shoulder. And oh dear, I had a pettiness about that. But that's not the kind of thing you talk in public about. My conversations with her about that have been very private. But I've been very open with her. I have told her there's something about him that frightens me, and whenever we're where he is, I would rather we not stay, and so we'd leave. If we went to a reception, he was there. She would speak with him, and we would get out of there. He was a very friendly, open. He was a good basketball player and a nice guy, and she liked him, and there's nothing wrong with that, and etc. So on ad infinitum. What else?
She mentioned that there were times when she got very depressed.
Yes. And I thought it's because she thought she'd made a mistake, should have married somebody else. And I didn't know how to help her with that. I just did the best I could, and would come home a little earlier. Huh.
What are some of the things that you two do well together?
Everything. Everything the married couples do together, we do it well together. I can't single out any one or any group. We just get along well. We tease each other a little bit and keep things light. And we worried about Jana for years. I felt so helpless, so absolutely helpless. I got so mad at Willie. Don't record this. Anyway, my using of that swear word, I realized, is the same as my dad with the pump. Suddenly he was so exasperated, that's the only way he could express it. And that's what I did to what's his name. Only I did it he's big enough he could have whipped me with one hand. And what a pompous son of a gun he was.
How did your relationship change after your kids all moved out?
I don't remember any big change. When did you move out?
I think when I went to college, it was fall of '83.
83.
Yeah.
We were living here still, here in Thatcher. Well, I'll tell you frankly, Jordan, one of our most difficult problems is Grandma Carpenter. She is angry, self-pitying, and can't resist the impulses that come to her to criticize somebody, and it's been very hard on your mother. You're two women, both wanting to run the house, and only one of them. You need final authority. I think I figured out some things I need to do just quietly on my own to lower the pressure there, but it's been very difficult for your mother. And but she's flesh and blood. She needs us, and we need to rise to that.
What memories of being together do you like to relive?
With Mom?
Yeah.
Nothing specific, just everything we do together is enjoyable and a good memory. There's never any bad words, never any unkind things said, etc. It's frankly, there isn't anything other than good experiences between us. And what we're going through now is a good experience. I wish we weren't having to do it, but it's a good experience. I'm not sure how much longer I'm going to live. My dad lived about 4 years longer than me, but he had a good heart attack that brought. He went to the temple on Friday evening, and Saturday morning he had a pain in his chest, and Saturday night, 6 o'clock, he was gone. And took my mother nearly 10 years to gradually fade away. And I don't know. I used to be afraid of that, and I would not even contemplate it. That's not true anymore. I believe in the passage in the 46th section that says, "Those who die unto me, their death shall be sweet." And I believe that. And those who don't die unto me, their death shall be bitter. And I've known one or two men who who I felt like their deaths were bitter. They'd been such scoundrels. Anyway, she and I are fine. You kids don't need to worry about us. We're going to weather this okay.
What are the keys to a good marriage?
I quote President, who's the president of the church? President Hinckley. Is when his father said to him, "Forget yourself and go to work." There's a measure of excellence in that, in a good marriage. Don't worry about whether the other one's measuring up or anything. Just forget yourself and let them be the center of your life, and stay busy, and be able to joke together and to laugh at other people's foibles. We have a high councilman here who's an attorney, and he's a kind of a little bit of a stern guy. And you know what the word epitome is.
Mm-hmm.
And he was making a speech in church one day here, and he said, and such and such is the epitome of whatever it was he was talking about. And Leon and I almost couldn't continue. We laughed so hard to each other. But I didn't dare go tell him. Anyway, he didn't know what epitome was. He called it epitome.
Okay, end of tape.